If you're like most of us, being able to de-stress your life, or at least your work life, is something we only dare to dream about. Today, most of us are running on all cylinders. Goals are set high, winning is everything, and so everything becomes a contest, including personal interactions. What if there was a philosophy, though, that provided a framework for reframing everyday situations from angst-generating experiences so that we reduce the tension and were able to move forward in a more relaxed and productive way? I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to A Seat at the Table, where each week forward thinking people from 176 countries and territories join me in sitting down with leaders, innovators, authors, and entrepreneurs so that we can find out what's working, what's not working, and what we might want to try ourselves. Meet Sean Coxall, an entrepreneur and apparel industry leader who has discovered a time tested philosophy that helps people turn the workplace into a better and more humane place through a program called Conscious at Work. On today's episode of A Seat at the Table, Sean will be discussing the importance of moving beyond skills and focusing on personal development. He'll be discussing the 5 worlds of mastery and talking about the 3 rules of conscious work. So join me in sitting down with Sean and finding out how we can make our workplace a better and more harmonious place.
So thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk about consciousness at work today. It's something very dear to my heart at the moment. And in fact, for me personally, it actually brings my two worlds together. As you've known, Jane, you've known me for some time, been into my whole spirit on my spiritual path. And now I'm excited to see how we can bring some of that learning and 4,000-year-old wisdom into the workplace. And actually, how do we raise the consciousness at work, yeah, of our employees?
I think that's so interesting because there is a very strong story around trying to, I don't, for lack of a better word, humanize the workplace. That's probably not the right word. Um, but certainly between people feeling that work has become so much of a sort of a grind with no purpose, right? And then with the whole
Absolutely,
AI
yeah,
narrative,
yeah.
which I'm not sure AI is going to take over humanity. Probably be more of another tool, but there's a lot of different points of view around that. So I think that, there's never been a time when it's been more relevant to, sort of bring to the table what you're talking about, which is, you're calling it consciousness at work, but also just, bringing a more spiritual point of view um, to the table.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think you do use the right word, humanize, because what we really need today is to get the human unlocked.
Right.
And that's really gets us back to the depth of what make us tick as human beings. What's important to us,
Yeah.
what really matters in our life. If you ask the average person, what's important to them, they will never say work. They'll tell you, family, holiday, sister, brother, their handbags or possessions, and yet they spend all their time at work, right? So if we don't teach people how to have a better time at work with better relationships and better success, then perhaps they're going to find it difficult. And also, when you teach them that at work, they can take it into their home life as well. And in today's changing world, it doesn't really matter what nature of business you're in. Success and improvement in profitability rarely shifts from just having a strategy or a vision. It's the people that will make it happen. So that's really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to help, organizations and the senior team really understand that if you can change the consciousness of your people, then absolutely you can improve your business. Um, so, it's a self-mastery driven approach to organizational transformation. And we really focus on five sort of worlds of mastery, five modules. Mastery of challenges, mastery of communications, mastery of time, which is really energy, mastery of money, and mastery of leadership. So we go quite deep into all of those topics, and we use the wisdom of Kabbalah and the Zohar, which is 4,000 years old and proven to actually, to help actually improve all these things. So I'll give you an example. We use a lot of techniques and skills within those modules. So if we talk about challenges, as individuals, we have something called our own internal bat. Bats animal lives in darkness and is afraid of light. And in our own lives, quite often we have a lot of challenges that we sort of are scared to tackle, maybe conversations with people that we don't really want to have because we think they might be difficult, or things that we need to change in our life. And we let them fester. And quite often, we then have difficulty in dealing with them because we don't face them. But when we actually face our bat, sometimes we'll be surprised that it's actually quite easy, or it's, I can say easy, but we have the tools and we learn to have the tools to actually manage them. So, in a lot of our modules, we'll take live examples, we'll take challenges perhaps in an organization that they've had, and we'll work through them and we'll look at, different aspects of them, including the emotional behavior side and what could have been done differently. And quite often you'll find challenges often come down to the human interaction, human beings, it's the people. It's not really the challenge itself. So that's really what we come up with. And we actually say that we'll give a money back guarantee, and we're absolutely certain that success will come. You'll see an improvement in the team. You'll see an improvement in your results. And we're so confident about this that, we don't even say that we will expect to charge for it unless we see the success. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. I think very few, I don't want to say organizations, but for anyone putting forward a program doesn't typically have that kind of a rock solid guarantee. So I think that's quite interesting. Um, you know, you feel very confident that what you teach works. What do you think makes your program so effective? Because there's a lot of people who are teaching something that at least superficially sounds similar, right? Whether it be a program or whether they be a leadership coach or a life coach or an executive coach. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are putting forward something that sounds, right, like a similar kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah, I think it's quite
what about what
unique.
you
I
do
mean,
is different?
well, we're helping people really to go inwards and actually understand more about themselves.
Okay.
And then how can they take a better version of themselves to work? We're on this earth to transform and change as human beings, and life gives us a lot of challenges. Quite often, those challenges are to help us grow and actually, learn from it. But perhaps we don't need to have such a challenging time, because if we transform ourselves, and transformation really comes from our thoughts, by the time we actually have an action or we say something, it's too late because it came from a thought that we had. So consciousness really is about changing your thoughts, and thinking in a different way, and then your actions will be different. So I think a lot of the programs that you see, we learn really about, the ego. And quite often, as we become more successful, our egos get bigger. And then sometimes our egos take over. And our ego is the thing that perhaps makes us get angry, shout at somebody,
Mm.
gossip about somebody, do something bad. Whereas our soul, which is the other part of us, it actually cringes every time that we do that. So when we become more aware of our actions through our consciousness, perhaps we can restrict our bad behaviors and maybe not shout so much, not get so angry. It's not about sort of being a walkover and becoming very placid, and it's just learning that we're being more aware of the words that come out of our mouth and the actions that we take and the consequences linked to those as well.
Very interesting. In a sense, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're really teaching people to think before they act, to be a little bit less reactive and a little bit more measured in their approach to things, to sort of, if they feel triggered or if they, rather than just exploding or saying what comes to mind, just like, okay, let's take a pause, right? Let's cool off a little bit. Let's think it through, rather than yelling maybe or really coming down hard on this employee. How would I want someone to approach me if I were that employee and I had, let's say, made this mistake? How would I want my boss to approach me? So just a matter of taking
Absolutely.
a step
Yeah.
back and or whether it's a colleague, if I disagree with a colleague, okay, how would I want someone to approach me if they disagreed with me? So it's a little bit more of a mindful approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just becoming much more aware of your actions and your behaviors. You know, if you want to have the best boss, then be the best employee. You know,
Right,
if you want to have a really good relationship with your peer group, then you have to put the effort in first. And we
right.
learn that a lot of it is really mirror behavior. So it is learning that, when we go to a meeting and when we interact with others, perhaps we have to think in a different way, put others first and
Mm.
actually listen to their point of view. Quite often, we don't even hear what other people say. We're so busy trying to get our point of view over that we don't hear what they say. So it's just making us much more aware of these behaviors that we have and going inside ourselves and learning how to have a different approach. And it all comes from, a little book called the Zohar,
Right,
which is thousands of years old. And really, if you ask me, what does it really say? It's common sense.
right, right.
Actually,
Yeah.
if you look at a
Practical
lot of
wisdom.
these things, very practical. A story from another student friend of mine, which is more of a personal story, is that she lives in a very big family and she's been having relationship issues with her husband, sort of separated at the moment, and she has to go to dinner with her husband and her mother-in-law.
Mm.
And her husband, she uses the word gaslights her in front of her mother-in-law, and she gets very upset. So we said to her, "Well, why'd you stay? Why
Mm.
don't you just get up and walk out?" And she started doing that. And she feels so empowered because now, if she goes with them and they start, she doesn't stay. So they actually don't start with her anymore.
Oh, that's
And then we
good.
explained this to another student, and she said, "Oh my God, I live with my mother, and my mother does the same with me. Every time I sit in the living room with her, she starts screaming at me." So we said, "Well, don't sit there, get up and walk out." And,
Yeah,
it's simple tricks that help people to really learn, how they can be more, in control of their emotions and their
right.
behaviors. That's a very simple trick, but I mean, it just shows you, right, how something so simple can have such a big effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that you can do that's really not confrontational, that's not like harsh words that you can't take back and then you're sorry that you said that or you know,
Absolutely.
any kind of
Yes,
the kind of thing that people do when they hit their breaking point and then they're sorry that they let things get that
that's
far,
right.
and it's very hard to undo that damage. Whereas, like you're saying, if you just do something that's sort of quiet, but it gets the point across, like if you're going to talk to me like that, I will not sit here. I'm not going to fight with you, and certainly I'm not going to have a public confrontation, but I shall remove myself from that situation. And therefore, you can do what you want to do, but you will do it without me.
Yeah, I mean, we learn also, like, if we're in a confrontational situation, it's very normal for if somebody gets angry for us to get angry back. So we
Yes.
learn, how do we pause? How do we almost like, imagine a spinning, invisible disc in front of you that actually stops the confrontation. You pause, you breathe, and then you're able to have a different response, perhaps, and maybe you can diffuse the situation so that we don't get to the point where you have a heated argument and then, like you say, everybody's sorry after, but we get to the point we don't even need to get to needing to be sorry. So we have a lot of experimental workshops, like I say, where we choose a challenge and we dissect it, questioning
Mm,
both the physical and the emotional learnings from that. We then offer private coaching with a senior team, where they can anytime, message, WhatsApp, call, Zoom, whatever
mm,
they want, where they could discuss something. And then during our teachings, we would have a monthly update where there'll be personalized action plans. What are we going to do? And then we'll review those the next month. And then we, as I say, expect to see an improvement in the team or in the results
Right.
very, very quickly, actually. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's really a form of self-mastery in a sense that you can't
That's right.
control other people, but you can
No.
control yourself.
Yeah, and actually, you can't change other people. So
Right.
if you ask the average person, they'll tell you all about how bad their partner is, their mother, their boss, their colleague, their workforce. You can't change them. The only thing you can do is change yourself. And as I said earlier, when we learn how to do that, then we can transform the other people. And we use mirror behavior, and we actually see, wow, my boss is much better with me now, or my colleagues are much better with me, you know?
Yes.
Um, so, I mean, in my own experience, I tried to do some of this when I was the president of Liam Fung, but I was really coming at it from a spiritual point of view, and perhaps put some people off. So I
Right.
think the beauty about what we're doing now is we're using words that are much more relatable. We're looking for results, and we're teaching people the mastery of, as I say, things that are very useful in business, whether that be leadership, communications, challenge, etc.
Perhaps you can explain a little bit about what you refer to as the three rules of conscious work, what you refer to as nothing is coincidence, you are not coincidence, and resistance is the enemy. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if we take the first one, that nothing is by coincidence, everything that happens to us has a karmic effect, right? So there's nothing that suddenly happens. There's no suddenly. It may be something that we've done before or a past action that we've done that brings, an effect, whether that be, feelings or words, something that we've said. So we become much more conscious about our actions, and we actually start to see the karmic effect of, things, why they may have happened, and then we can start linking it in our mind to things that we've done. Perhaps we said something that really upset somebody, and perhaps that's why they're being a little bit more difficult with us. And
Mm.
then we start to reflect on that. So perhaps next time we have a conversation with that person, we're a little bit more careful about what we say to them. The second thing really is, as I said earlier, we're all here to evolve. We're here to grow and learn, and a lot of our challenges really are here to help us evolve and transform.
Mm.
So when we're aware of that, when we're in a challenge, particularly in darkness, perhaps we can handle it differently, see it maybe as a blessing, maybe embrace our feelings. And then also, I think a very important word is allow it. We
Mm.
can't always be in great times, right? Or good
Yeah.
times. We have to allow difficult times to come. We actually say, well, what's the opposite of darkness is light. If you go into a dark room and you turn the light on, you transform it, right? So when we're in difficult times, when we're in challenges, we learn how to manage through them and come out of the other side. And then, the biggest enemy of success is really our resistance to change. So
Mm.
wherever we resist growth, we contract and diminish our potential, basically. So we're put in situations where we're forced to change.
Right.
So sometimes that's why we see people have tremendous difficulty, is because it's the only way the universe can get them to change in the end. So if we can learn how to change ourselves, it'll be much less painful for us. I was going to say, we also see these point of resistance, which is like our ego patterns. We can start to see how our ego, comes out in the same way in different situations. And then perhaps we can control that and have a little bit more restriction. It's very easy to shout at people, but when you're aware that you're doing it, even when you can feel yourself about to shout, you actually, believe it or not, can learn to stop yourself and take a pause and restrict that bad behavior. Um, Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it leads into what you said is the core premise of consciousness at work, which, as you put it, it's, everlasting shift in organization begins with a shift in consciousness. And I think that's really important because I think oftentimes we dive in towards a solution, right? Without really stopping to think about how we maybe need to change our mindset or even become conscious of what the problem is. Not that there is a problem, but
Yes.
become conscious of what exactly is the problem here that we're, as opposed to just racing towards a solution and get it done as fast as possible.
Yeah, I have a story which I often tell, which is, during my time at Lee& Fung, I was given all of the Claiborne brands, but they were actually, when I was given them to look after, they were in their demise. Liz
Ah,
Claiborne was having a very tough time. It was an organization where they had many, many brands, but they were all set up against each other. Nobody
mm,
would share, nobody would help. They would really hate each other and fight with each other. And it was funny because the smallest one was Kate Spade, and nobody bothered about that because it was so tiny. But what was interesting is in Kate Spade, they put two leaders. They had a head of commercial and a head of design. And those two leaders decided to work very well together. They were almost like hand in hand partners. And every single person that they put underneath them had the same behavior and would really work as a team, would help each other, would share. It was an incredible contrast for me to see that if you compare it to like Juicy Couture or Lucky
mm.
Brand. And what was strange was in the end, it was the most successful brand. It was the only brand that actually Liz Claiborne didn't sell off. They sold everything else off. And then in the end, it was the only brand. And then eventually Coach bought it for $3.3 billion. So it was
Right,
a fascinating story. And really, without realizing it, they were doing consciousness at work. And
right.
because the leaders believed it and actually, walked the talk, everybody else followed. Yeah. And you saw the result with Kate
Yeah.
Spade. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so interesting. And you're right. You often do see that that is the crucial element when you have multiple brands that oftentimes look like they're pretty much equal in terms of the brand value and the design and the quality and so on. But yet, what makes one succeed? And oftentimes, it's really like you say, it's the teamwork behind the scenes. It's the leadership. You oftentimes hear about that, whether it be a small company or a large company, the role
Yeah.
that a really good leader plays. And unfortunately, I think we have seen an era where that's been put sort of on the back burner, and it's been more about just driving shareholder returns, whether it's a public company or a private company. It's more about how you can get the numbers to be where you want them to be, which is of course important. I mean, we can't deny that, you have to stay in business and it takes a lot more than simply, you know, a good leader behind the scenes, but it's become very skewed towards a focus on very specific outcomes and oftentimes at the expense of being able to create that corporate culture that ultimately takes you the distance.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. When we started this conversation, we said that you can't just have vision and a strategy. What we do, Cal, is that we link strategy to an inner culture. We turn challenges into catalysts, and
Mm.
we build a conscious high performance culture from the inside out. And we have very happy people that not only are happy and perform at work, but when they go home, they're able to bring that into their personal life as well. So.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right about that. Once you've developed those skills, it's easier to bring them with you into other situations. You almost become, I don't want to say reprogrammed, that's not really the right way, but you've trained yourself up to respond in certain ways, to be able to be less reactive, to be able to put things into perspective. And when you're doing that all day at work, it's easier, at least when you get outside of work,
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
continue that behavior pattern.
Well, it also becomes very difficult to have two personalities, and a
Right,
lot of people do that, unfortunately. They sort of, they go to work and they turn into a monster. And what we learn here is that, bring yourself to work and bring the better version of yourself to work. So
right.
it's much less stressful when you can do that as well, when you can be one person and you can treat everybody in your life the same.
Yes.
We see a lot of leaders who, they're real. very tough at work, and and yet they go home to their family and they're a different person. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah, very, very important. I mean, certainly at a time when I think people feel tremendous stress in almost any industry, right? When you're talking to people, everyone talks about how stressed they are and how the demands have become more and more. To be able to have that self mastery, and whether you be the senior leader or whether you be a mid-tier leader or maybe you don't really have much leadership at all, the skills can be brought forward into how you approach your work and how you frame things so that it's works better for you.
absolutely, yeah. And you'll find that there's a real harmony. When people are conscious and they have the right consciousness, everything just falls into place. It's quite incredible, actually. So, there are no coincidences, and yet the whole life that you have feels like a coincidence
Mm,
because we become much more in tune with each other. So
right.
we're using some of the side of the brain that we don't normally use, our intuition, our ability to read people and all of those things. So it's quite exciting, actually. Yeah. And I think the whole world is moving into a higher dimension now, anyway, where all these skills are going to become very important. We're seeing a lot more female leaders now come into place because that whole feminine energy is now going to be very important for the world. It doesn't mean that they're soft, it's just that women have a different way of looking at things, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it is interesting, and particularly as we enter an age that's becoming more automated, whether it be through AI, which tends to be the elephant in the room nowadays, but through other areas of automation, a lot of people are trying to redefine the role of a human being in a workplace. And oftentimes it's exactly what you're discussing. It's this consciousness. It's the kind of thing that is, at least at this point, very difficult to program into any kind of a non-human being. Some people may
Absolutely.
debate that with me as to whether or not AI is sentient, but okay, fine, different conversation. But at least at the moment, what we bring is that humanness, and that's a very important part. And to develop our skills around that is at least as important as to be able to develop our technical skills.
Yeah, it's that human element, Jane, that you talked about in the beginning. And I think that as we have more robotics around us, we're all going to crave for that human element. We're going to want to see somebody smile and somebody, be compassionate with us and be caring and loving and be an ear to listen and all of those words. That's going to become so important. I mean, I'm sure that you find AI is great, but it can be very frustrating as well because you ask a question and it just fires at you all the facts,
Right.
and it doesn't really know yet, how to say those things.
Mm.
And when we become more conscious and more aware, part of that is really learning, how to say things and what to say, and more importantly, what not to say and what not to do.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. I think you're right. I think that for all the digitization that we have and that we enjoy and that is in many ways facilitated our lives, people do crave that human experience. I mean, we see that with a lot of the return to physical retail that people said was definitely going to go away because now you could get everything online, and you can get everything online. You can get even more and more things online than ever before, but people still want, like you're saying, that face to face, that human interaction, even if it's just interacting for 5 seconds with the cashier at the supermarket who smiles and says, "Have a nice day," even though we know they're trained to say that to everybody. But still, you crave that human interaction that oftentimes you don't get with the, as you said, the work remote, order everything online. There's people who haven't seen another human being in a couple of days.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's quite interesting. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time in China recently, and the whole world thinks that the Chinese buy everything online. It's not true. They have the most amazing new shopping centers and shopping experiences. And what is amazing is you go into a store, and the young people will try their hardest to communicate with you, even if their English isn't that great. And it's so nice. You really
Yeah.
feel that they're really interested in you and your purchase, and they'll tell you a little story perhaps, and it's a really nice experience. Yeah. So one of my greatest joys at the moment is spending more time in China, actually. I think it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It is an interesting mix of very advanced technology and yet, as you're saying, also a lot of priority given to a human experience as well. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see the balance between those two things.
Well, if you look at the Chinese, they're also combining it. I mean, if you take Luckin Coffee, which is an incredible
Yeah,
company, it's completely AI driven. You order it on the app on your phone. But for example, it's all in Chinese and they're opening in Hong Kong. I don't speak Chinese, but they have staff in the store. So I go in and they help me order it on my app and they smile
right.
at me and then they pass me my coffee and it's half the price of Starbucks. And in fact, the beans are better, you know? So I
Yeah.
think the Chinese are really showing us how they combine the technology with that human element to give us a better experience, actually,
Yes,
perhaps.
absolutely. Absolutely. Really, it really comes down to that. It really comes down to that total experience, facilitating those things that really don't have a very experiential aspect to them through automation, digitization, and so forth. And then understanding what things really matter to people and investing heavily into the person to person experience within
Yeah,
that sector.
absolutely. Yeah, and we learn also that the more that we become aware of our actions and the more that we think about others, the more beautiful world that we're going to have ourselves, you know.
Yes.
One of the things that we teach, which is quite a simple thing, is when you first start off, you know, make way for others, let other people go in front of you. So if you're driving
Mm,
a car, for example, always if there's people trying to come out, let them out. And
right.
your world will completely change. You'll have people smiling at you,
Mm.
thanking you rather than cursing you, you know, which is what normally happens when we don't let people in front of us, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite wonderful to see how your world can transform when we become more conscious. Yeah. So
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think all of us really could do with a little de-stressing. And like you said, who cares if you're, the first one to turn the corner or the first guy to get off the bus, right? You beat two other people, getting off a train because you pushed instead of
absolutely.
holding back for a minute and letting the guy ahead of you get off. It's like how much of a big win
Yes,
is that?
exactly.
And yet
And what you'll
we see
find
it
is
all
the
the time.
universe will then put you in front somehow because that's how karma works.
Yeah.
And you know, I think a beautiful saying is you can't always have a good day, but you can know how to make a bad day good. And that's what this helps you do as well.
Yeah,
So you
I
can
like that.
transform your day. You can transform your life. You can, if you're miserable and unhappy, honestly, when you start to become more conscious and aware, you can transform anything in your life. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
And
fantastic.
one last thing really is we can't change the world, but we can change ourselves. And if we all woke up and wanted to do that, we'd have a much better world to live in, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Sean, thank you so much for sharing so many wonderful insights. I've learned a lot just discussing this with you here now. I think a lot of people listening to this also have gotten quite a few takeaways. I'm going to put the links to all the different things that you do in the show notes if you're listening to this as a podcast or in the description area if you're watching this as a video. And I certainly would encourage people to take an opportunity to reach out to Sean. I think there's a lot all of us can take away from this.
Thank you so much, Jane. Yeah, I really appreciate the time in allowing me to share this wonderful knowledge. And like you say, if anybody's interested, then please just reach out. And we're happy to speak to anyone that wants to discuss it further. So thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks again, Sean. Thanks for being with us here today on A Seat at the Table. If you'd like to see some of the other episodes, head on over to our podcast website at seat.fm. That's seat.fm. There's also a link here in the show notes. And if you're thinking that you'd like to be a guest on the show, you'll find information on how to apply there as well. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Jane Singer, and I will see you in the next episode.